And he surveyed the whole tribe. And our whole tribe, he found one diabetic in the whole tribe. But today, those that are over age 35, 50% have diabetes. It's rampant. It's an epidemic. Have their genetics changed in 100 years? But genetics don't change that fast. Did their diet change? Yes. Yeah, they adopted a Western diet, and they had no resistance to it, no epigenetic adaptation to it. Their diet changed. So genetics can predispose you to diabetes, but if you make the right choices, you don't have to get it. Dr. Murdoch, a endocrinologist, I shared this last night, Loma Linda University, he said, genetics slows the gun, but your lifestyle choices will lose the trigger. So you can have a genetic predisposition to it, you just don't pull the trigger with the wrong lifestyle choices. What about the rest of us? Between 1958 and 1994, a span of just 36 years, the prevalence of diagnosed cases of diabetes increased, is this what, 5%? Or like 50%? 500%? That's an epidemic. This is incredible. When I went to medical school, I read about chapter diabetes. I thought, I wonder if I'm ever going to see a diabetes. That's the bread and butter of internists today. Have our genetics changed in 50, 80 years? No. Have our eating habits changed? Yes, they have. Which brings up another question. Can what we eat cause diabetes? Yes. Well, this is not a new question. Back in 1927, Dr. Sweeney asked the same question. And so he said, I want to see if I can give diabetes to medical students. Now, medical students, of course, is 4 years. I think in 4 years he could do that? It took him for 2 days. Want to see what he did? That's what he did. First, he tested them for diabetes, made sure they didn't have diabetes. So he did a glucose tolerance test. We do them even today. Gave 75 grams of glucose. Then he measured their blood sugar at the time of dosage. And then 30 minutes later, 60 minutes later, 120 minutes later. And they all fell in a normal range. Blood sugars did not go above 150, and that's normal. That's a healthy person. So they did not have diabetes. They did not have pre-diabetes. Then he did an intervention, and then he tested them for diabetes. So we want to know, how do you test someone for diabetes? Well, first one, you can check their A1C. Hemoglobin A1C. If it's over 6.5%, that's diabetes. What is a hemoglobin A1C? Hemoglobin is a protein. If your blood sugars are high, and if they're high for a long period of time, that sugar will combine with the protein, the hemoglobin carrying your oxygen. It'll combine with the hemoglobin and create hemoglobin A1C. And the higher the percentage, the higher, that means the higher your blood sugar was, and the longer it was high. Since a red cell only lasts about 3 months, that A1C reflects what your blood sugars have been doing over the last 3 months. It's a nice average to see what you've done from one quarter to the next. Another way to diagnose diabetes is with a fasting blood sugar. That's where you check your blood sugar in the morning. It's 126 or above. That's one way to diagnose diabetes. That's before breakfast. A random blood sugar, if you check it after eating, if it's 200 or more, that's another way to diagnose it. And if you do a glucose tolerance test, which is what Dr. Sweeney was doing, you give 75 grams of glucose, and you check their blood sugar, and if at 2 hours it's over 200, that's another way to diagnose diabetes. So, what did he do? Well, after it showed that all the medical students did not have diabetes, he fed them 2 days of olive oil, butter, mayonnaise made with egg yolks, and cream, a very high-fat, animal-based and processed food diet, high in fats. Then he did a glucose tolerance test, and this is what he found. 4 of the patients, the students, they all went above 150. That was pre-diabetes. They were heading for diabetes. The other 2, at 2 hours, were over 200, and that was diabetes in just 2 days. Well, that sounds like bad news, but the good news is this insulin resistance, it can come on quickly, but it can also go away quickly as well. I'm going to show you how to do that. just eliminate what they did to cause it. When they put it back on a regular diet, their glucose tolerance has returned back to normal. So the question is, well, what's happening to cause this change in just 2 days? Well, yeah, we're going to look at what the pancreas does. How does the pancreas adjust blood sugars? Well, when you take glucose down there at the bottom, you eat it, it goes into your digestive tract, it goes into your bloodstream. Your blood sugars start to rise. When that happens, the pancreas over there on the right has insulin, and it releases insulin. Now, insulin is like a little key, and it goes to the keyholes in the cells of the liver and opens up the doors to the liver. So the sugar goes to the liver, gets stored as a starch called glycogen. Sugars are strung together in a string. It also opens the doors to your muscles. Then sugar can be stored in the muscle as glycogen, or it can get burned. And it also can open the doors to the cells of the fat, where sugar can be stored as fat. It can be changed to triglycerides and also stored as fat in the fat cells. So, and this is an important point, insulin levels shift you to burning carbohydrates and away from burning fats. And high insulin levels cause you to store fats. So keeping the insulin levels low can help reduce weight. Now that's the way it's supposed to work. But when you take a high-fat diet from animal products, and even the free oils, even if they're plant-based free oils, extracted from the plant, they can cause a problem. There's a little fat stuff, the little fat molecules going into the bloodstream after a high-fatty meal, and it's plugging up the keyholes, you can see there. Those keyholes are now plugged up like someone put bubble gum in your keyhole. You can't get the keys to go up, and the pancreas senses that. It says, uh-oh, blood sugars are going up, we better release insulin. But insulin can't get in the day shut. And now when you take a starch or a blood sugar, the sugar tries to get in the keyholes, it tries to get in the cells, it can't get in the cells. It just stays in the blood, and the blood sugars rise. So the problem really isn't the carbohydrates, the problem is the fat plugging up the keyholes. Now, some diabetics, anybody know a diabetic? Yeah, everybody knows somebody's diabetes because it's so rampant today. Some of the diabetics notice, now wait a minute, in the morning my blood sugar is high. It's not fair. I haven't eaten anything for 12 hours. Why is it high in the morning? Well, this is what's happening. Normally during the day, you take in sugar, goes into the bloodstream, or a starch, which is turned to sugar, goes into the bloodstream. The pancreas senses that, releases the insulin. Insulin goes and opens the doors to the liver, and the glucose is stored in your liver as glycogen, starch. You have a 24-hour supply of starch in your liver. So if you stop eating today, you can last 24 hours on that glycogen. But after 24 hours, then you go into starvation. You start burning fat and muscle, and that's the starvation process. So during the day, you're storing sugar in the liver. Then at night, when you're not eating, or you shouldn't be eating, the blood sugars start dropping, and the insulin levels drop. Now, the liver's job at night is to make sure the blood sugar doesn't go too low because you're not eating. And so when it sees the insulin levels going low, it says, the blood sugar must be low. I better release sugar back into the blood to keep the blood sugar from going too low, keep you out of a coma. And so at night, insulin comes out of the keyhole. The liver says, oh, no insulin in the blood. That means the blood sugar is low. I better fix it. And it puts the sugar back into the bloodstream. And that's how it's supposed to work. Beautiful design that God gave us, because I'm going into coma at night. What happens when you're on a high-fat diet? Well, with the high-fat diet, the insulin keyhole is plugged up. So at night, when the liver is looking out the keyhole to see how much insulin is there, it doesn't just see a low level. It can't see any insulin because it's plugged up. It can't see it. So it thinks the insulin level is very low and gets kind of nervous. It says, uh-oh, we better keep that sugar high. And so it starts releasing not just a little bit of sugar, a lot of sugar to keep that level high because it thinks the level's too low because of insulin resistance. So one of the simplest ways to check for insulin resistance is do a fasting blood sugar. You can check this yourselves with glucometers, and if it's elevated, you might be heading for diabetes. One caveat, the little glucometers that many diabetics use, the error is plus or minus 15%. So you can have a reading of 100, but your real blood sugar might be 115, or it might be as low as 85. So just remember, that just gives you a ballpark number. They're helpful, but not extremely accurate. Okay, now, has anyone heard, I got diabetes, sugar and carbohydrates, that's the problem? You've heard of that. Well, Dr. Sweeney, he asked the same question back in 1927. He said, is sugar the problem? So he said, okay, we succeeded in producing insulin resistance with fats. Let's see if we can do it with sugar. So he got his medical students again because they're so motivated. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you sugar, candy, pastry, white bread, baked potatoes, syrup, a high sugar, high starch diet, bananas, rice, oatmeal. And then he tested them with a glucose tolerance test. And on the left, you see what happened after the high carbohydrate diet. All the blood sugar stayed below 150. They did not have diabetes, and they did not have pre-diabetes. So, conclusions he had was, number one, you can make someone diabetic with lots of fats and free oils. Number two, you can cure these new diabetics by eliminating the fats and oils. And number three, sugar is not the primary cause of diabetes. Now, I'm not recommending a high sugar diet, but if you're going to get the sugars, get them in their natural form. The fruits, mainly the fruits are the high sugar things. They're in starches, they're in fiber that slows the release of the sugar, and it's more protective than even fruit juices and things where there's no fiber. Well, in 1973, Dr. James Anderson, world authority on diabetes, he said, let's repeat Dr. Sweeney's tests. He repeated it. He was able to turn lean, healthy individuals into mild diabetics in less than 2 weeks by giving them a diet 65% of the calories from fats. So he was successful in doing that. Then he said, does sugar cause diabetes? So he said, I don't think Dr. Sweeney was trying hard enough to give diabetes to patients with sugar. I'm going to give them a pound of sugar a day. And not just for 2 days, not just for 1 week. I'm going to do it for 11 weeks and see what I can do. But after 11 weeks, he could not produce even one diabetic after 11 weeks. And he gave up. So again, refined sugar has other problems, but insulin resistance was not one of them. Dr. Brunzo, he also asked, is sugar the primary problem of diabetes? He took subjects with mild diabetes. They were on a 45% simple sugars. He increased it to 85%, and the fasting blood sugars actually fell. So again, I don't want to do, which the point is that it's not the sugar that is the problem in diabetes. So we can make someone diabetic with lots of fats and oils. We can quote cure these new diabetics with by eliminating fats and oils, and the sugars are not the primary cause of diabetes. So let's go to the island of Nauru. It's an island in the Pacific Ocean. We're going to look at the whole island. And there it is, the center. Now, by the way, up to the left is that little dot in the ocean. That's Guam, where we spent about 8 years with patients there. But Nauru, prior to World War II, they ate bananas, taro, breadfruit, coconuts, some fresh fruit, some fresh fish, and some vegetables. And some pictures of some natives at that time. There was no overweight one among them. They were no high blood pressure, no diabetes, in good health. But then, after World War II, they found phosphorus in the bird dung, deposited over a couple thousand years, and phosphorus became very expensive. The world needed it, and they became the wealthiest per capita nation in the world. What do you do when you have money? You got to spend it. What are you going to spend it on? They imported all the Western foods and canned and frozen meats. Intake increased, fish and sodas increased, oils increased, fat intake increased, fiber decreased. Many meals would not contain just one meat dish, but 2 or 3. And now, 1 out of 3 natives over the age of 15 has diabetes. Obesity after spotty complications are common. He does not look like they looked like after the 1940s. I mean, I like his swim trunks, but other than that, he's very different. Now, after World War II, a survey of the Navy of the Micronesian Islands was conducted to find the incidence of diabetes. What was it? They surveyed all the islands. They could not find any diabetes. Very low. But now, in islands like Guam, diabetes is #1 problem. Obesity is heart attacks and strokes is #2 problem. And you wonder why? Well, we went to the Nutcracker Suite in the University of Guam, bring that on, and on the side of the wall we saw a big banner. Spam, flavor of God. Delicacy there. That's their diet. Countries that have low-fat, high-fiber, plant-based diet have little diabetes. The Africans, Asians, Polynesians. This was true in the 70s to 80s, but when we visited China just in July, McDonald's on every corner. Fast food places are taking over out there. So this is changing. Now, remember those 6 medical students that Dr. Sweeney gave a high-fat diet to produce diabetes in 2 days? What if you took a whole nation, like America, and increased their fat and oil consumption to where that composed 40 to 50% of the calories? Do you think we could produce the rate of diabetes we have today, that we could increase the rate of diabetes by 500%? Yeah, that's what we've done. And that's why it's no surprise we have the epidemic we have today. So far we've seen that fat causes insulin resistance by plating up the insulin receptors. We've seen that insulin resistance can lead to diabetes. What about prediabetes? Are there other accounts of insulin resistance? Well, there are other accounts. This was actually demonstrated as far back as 1935 using controlled experiments. Sir Harold Hemsworth, a medical doctor at the University Hospital in London, showed that increasing the fat in the diet decreased the patient's sensitivity to insulin. It increased insulin resistance. And they would then have to give more insulin to control the blood sugars. He showed them that the level of blood sugar constantly changed in response to the amount of fat in the diet. Now, just yesterday, I reviewed a diabetics sheet, and they were recording their blood sugars, their insulin dose, and their carbohydrate intake. There was no spot for fat intake. It doesn't exist. And that's a problem, because what happens is if I have 10 units of insulin, and that's controlling my blood sugars this week, but next week, let's say I happen to be on a high-fat diet, because I'm not paying attention to that, no one told me to. I happen to be on a high-fat diet, now that same 10 units is not going to work well, my blood sugar is going to go up. But if the next week I happen to be on a low-fat diet, because I'm not paying attention to fats, that same 10 units can cause it to go too low. And this is one of the struggles with diabetics, is trying to predict how much insulin to give themselves, and changing the fat intake is one way that makes it even more difficult. Other people on a high-based diet can get rid of insulin resistance. Lowering your insulin dose, it gets more consistent and many times go up. In 1964, Dr. Felber did another interesting experiment. He gave non-diabetics, these were healthy people, he gave them a high-fat diet, and he showed that the insulin levels rose by 35%. This is an important concept. When the pancreas sees that, the normal 30 units I release on a daily basis, it's not working because those insulin receptors are plugged up. What am I going to do to keep the sugars controlled? I'll release more insulin. So it releases, instead of 30, it'll go up to 40 units a day, later 15 units, and it keeps increasing. And that will control the blood sugars for about 12 years. But at the end of 12 years, blood sugars start rising again because the pancreas can't keep up anymore. By the way, and this is where obesity comes into play, when as the insulin levels are rising for about 12 years as you approach diabetes, your blood sugars are normal, but the insulin levels are higher. Is that a problem? Well, it is, because not only does insulin push sugar into the cells to be burned, it also pushes fat into the fat cells to be stored, and it prevents fat from being burned. So as the insulin levels rise, what happens to the weight? It gets higher and higher. It's not related to the exercise, it's not related to the calorie intake, it's related to insulin resistance, which is cumulative. On the same American diet, that insulin level keeps increasing, the weight goes up, and people can't understand why. Because they might have a walking program, they might be trying to restrict calories or whatever, but it's not, they're fighting the battle in the wrong place. If they look at insulin resistance in a plant-based diet, they can lose that weight. Later, insulin resistance was confirmed in 34 animal studies that a high-fat diet caused insulin resistance. Now, the drug companies are working very hard to make drugs to help cure diabetes, to control it. Do they know about insulin resistance? Well, they actually do. How do you know they know that? Because they have a problem. When they have a new drug, they have to test it on a diabetic rat. Now they've got a real problem, because where are they going to get a diabetic rat? Because last time I was in Walmart, they weren't selling. You get a diabetic rat. They have to make them diabetic, and they know how to do it. They take a normal rat, and they feed it 60% of their diet, saturated fat, in the form of lard, and in several weeks they've got their diabetic rats. And now they can test their drug. Now, you may want to think, well, hey, why don't you go out to these drug companies and share with them that, you're working really hard to make these drugs to control diabetes. Why don't you share with them, with the people, that these high-fat foods, the way you make rats diabetic is the same way people get to be diabetic. You can share that with them. You wouldn't have so many diabetics, and you wouldn't have to work so hard making all these drugs. You want to do that? You're laughing. All right, well, I get the sense you're not going to do that. 15 recent human studies also confirm that high-fat diets do cause insulin resistance. Now, let's say I have insulin resistance, but I don't have diabetes yet. Can I wait till I get diabetes? Kind of like the guy in the cartoon who says, okay, doc, get me straight. How long can I ignore your advice? The problem is, even if you have pre-diabetes, you're at risk. You can be at risk of a major cardiac event. You're at increased risk of a non-cardiovascular mortality, either stroke, heart attack. And the heart attacks, it's scary. You think, well, many patients have chest pain before their heart attack. Actually, those that die, 40 to 50% of them that die of heart attack, the very first symptom they get when they have heart disease is a fatal heart attack. So you want to take steps now to avoid heart disease, even if you don't have chest pain. Liver pathology. You get a fatty liver with prediabetes. What is a fatty liver? Well, when the insulin levels are high to overcome the insulin resistance, it pushes fat into the fat cells, causing it to get heavier. It also pushes fat into the liver. You get a fatty liver. Have you heard of that? Any people having fatty livers? You get a fatty liver. And when that fat gets into the liver, it's toxic. It causes inflammation, and the enzymes that the liver produces to do its work, with that inflammation, they leak out into the bloodstream. And we can test for those liver enzymes in the bloodstream. They can go up, they can go up. How long does it take to get a fatty liver? Well, has anybody seen Super Size? The videos. Okay, it's got someone there. It's kind of a gross video, but it does make a point. It's a journalist who went on total McDonald's diet for 30 days. Saw his doctor at the beginning, 2 weeks, and 4 weeks. And the doctor said, yeah, you're in great health. You know, you're going to do this thing. Okay, no problem. They didn't see any problem with it. But he got his blood work done at 2 weeks, and his liver enzymes were up to the roof. They had skyrocketed, and the doctor said, whatever you're doing, stop. Well, he didn't. He completed his 30 days. He survived it. But he had a fatty liver in just 2 weeks. By the way, he also gained 26 pounds in that period. Erectile dysfunction, hypertension, they all go with the insulin resistance syndrome. And the good news is they are reversible if you move this type of diet. So how do you know if you have prediabetes? Well, if you get a fasting glucose 100 to 125, and to be accurate, you really need this drawn by a lab, like LabCorp Plus, because they can use these to ask your doctor. If you're seeing a regular doctor, they'll be checking for this. You can do a glucose tolerance test, and if your blood sugars after the sugar pill go up between 140 and 199, that's prediabetes. Or if you have a hemoglobin A1C 5.7, 6.4, that's prediabetes. It should be 5.6 or less. Diabetic, well, you can prevent diabetes. In this study, they found that diet and exercise is more effective than using metformin or placebo. Exercise, you only need 150 minutes a week, and they lost weight in that program as well. Now, if you're on the typical American diet and you live long enough, chances are almost 50% you're going to get diabetes or prediabetes. Here's the rate of prediabetes. If you're on the bottom, you see different age ranges. On the left, you see 20 to 44-year-old age group. They've got about a 5% risk of getting prediabetes in that age group. But if you're 65 and over, it's about 25% risk of prediabetes. But if you add to that the risk of having undiagnosed diabetes, and on top of that, the prevalence of diagnosed cases of diabetes, it's almost 43%. It's like almost half the people will be getting diabetes. So when people tell me, yeah, one of my parents has prediabetes or diabetes, so I'm prone to it, statistically, one of your parents probably should have. 1 out of 2 people are going to have it. You got 2 parents, probably one's going to have it. So, don't attribute the diabetes in the family to genetics. Many times it's related to lifestyle. Okay, we knew that insulin led to diabetes, but now we know it leads to a collection of syndromes called the insulin resistance syndrome. It has a package of things that come together. And insulin resistance doesn't just cause diabetes, it causes, it causes the diabetes or prediabetes, fasting blood sugars above 100. If you have 3 of these symptoms, you have syndrome X. The second point is a waist circumference over 40 for men, over 35 for women. Again, this is caused by the increased insulin that the body is producing to overcome the insulin resistance. That insulin tries to act fat cells and causes obesity. Blood pressure is high. We have a whole talk on why insulin resistance causes high blood pressures, but it does. Triglycerides over 150. And lastly, if the good cholesterol is less than 40 for men or less than 50 for women. If you have 3 of those points, you win. You have syndrome X. And that's a pre-diabetes syndrome, and it puts you at risk for heart disease, stroke, and death. How common is it? It's 20 to 29-year-old age group, syndrome X, maybe 5% of the population, but if you're 60 or more, 43% of the population. If you're 70, it's dropped actually to 42. I don't know why it dropped. Possibly the ones in the prior group might have died off. I don't know. There was a slight drop. And this is preventable. That's the bottom line. Can I give rats syndrome X? Actually, yes, I can. We know how to do it. They fed them a diet of lard, 32% lard, corn oil, and sugar and casein. In 4 weeks, they had a drop in insulin sensitivity, and at 8 weeks, they had another drop. This is important because on the American diet, insulin resistance is cumulative. The longer you're on the American diet, the higher the insulin resistance will go. This is an important point because I had a patient who was renewing his diabetic medications. I said, you know, if you change the plant-based diet without the oils, you could get off your medicines. He said, you know, that's too much work. I would just as soon stay on my medicine the rest of my life and eat the way I'm used to. I said, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. The medicines you're on now will work for a year or two, and as your insulin resistance continues to climb on this diet, and in another year or two, you have to add another medicine. And then a little later, a third pill. And when I get to 3 pills and they don't work anymore, then we start the insulin. And then we have to keep increasing the insulin. And so that concept we have to try to dispel so that if he wants to avoid where he's heading, he really needs to make some lifestyle changes. Also, the high-fat diet produced abdominal obesity, which occurred at 4 weeks and continued to increase. Because insulin resistance is cumulative, the longer you're on the American diet, the higher the insulin resistance, the higher the weight levels go. And so anything you do to reverse insulin resistance, the weight will start coming down. There's also a rise in total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides. This is the third part of the metabolic syndrome that that's now happening. Is it reversible? And that's really what we want to look at. The good news is it is reversible. Does a low-fat diet work to reverse insulin resistance? Well, one of the first studies done was in 1931. University of Montreal Dr. Benitz did a 5-year controlled study with 100 diabetics on a 20% fat, high carbohydrate diet. He lowered the fat intake from our normal 40 to 50% down to 20%. And in 5 years, 24% were able to stop using insulin and return to normal. That was pretty good. We're finding we can do better than that even today. What was his conclusion? He said a potential diabetic can be transformed into a completely diabetic individual by administration of the time-honored carbohydrate-free diet of meat and fat. What is he talking about? He's saying back then they thought, okay, blood sugars are high, so we got to get rid of the sugar and the starch. Well, you only have 3 sources of calories. You've got carbohydrates, that's sugar and starch, protein, and fat. If you get rid of the sugar and starch, what are you left with? Fat and protein. What's that going to do to the insulin resistance? It's going to go up. He's saying you're going to make the problem worse if you give them a carbohydrate-free diet of fat and protein. Now, unfortunately, there are some nutritionists today, dietitians, that still believe this. They say get rid of the carbs. So when I talk to a patient, I tell them about diet, they say, oh no, I talk to my dietitian, I haven't talked to me about diet. I have to ask them what the dietitian is telling them. Because there are dietitians and nutritionists that understand this principle. They're very good and they help people transition to a plant-based diet. But there's controversy out there. And so you gotta get the dietitian that's kind of on your team and helping you in this direction. 1955, Dr. Singh said, I wonder if we can do better than Dr. Benitz. So he did his own study. He put 80 insulin-taking diabetics. He didn't lower the fat just to 20%. He went down to 11% fat diet of natural foods. He used whole foods in this. And at the end of 18 weeks, all but 12 were off their insulin injections. That is 85% were off their insulin. Very successful. And he said on a very low fat diet, the endogenous insulin, the insulin your body's producing, exerts its curative effect within days, and most patients can be stabilized in such a diet alone, and some patients totally cured. Dramatic statement. Then, in 1981, Dr. Anderson took 13 diabetic patients who were on the American Diabetic Association diet, which is 34% fat and 23% protein. He said, I don't think the ADA diet, the American Diabetic Association diet, is good enough. So he stopped their diet. And he put them on a 9% high-fat, a 9% low-fat diet, high-fiber, starchy diet. If they were just taking pills, 100% of them got off the pills. If they were taking insulin, 50% in this short time could stop taking their insulin. Now, the question is, now with these kind of results, why doesn't the American Diabetic Association program change their recommendations? Has anyone seen What the Health, H-E-A-L-T-H? You've seen that? The bottom line is that the journalists found that many of these companies, American Heart Association, Diabetic Association, Cancer Association, I think they have good intentions, but they are sponsored by the meat and dairy industry. And they can't state their things, and it affects their recommendations. We'd like to believe the recommendations are purely guided by scientific evidence, but there are economic and political forces out there that can change the recommendations that are made. The good news is we live in America, we have free choice, and we can choose for ourselves the diet that can be the most healthy. What are the success rates today? If they're taking pills, 95% should be able to get off the pills. If they're on insulin, 50 to 75% should be able to get off the insulin, and that's within weeks. This is type 2 diabetes we're talking about, not type 1. That's different animal. We're going to finish by talking about the healthy fats and beta cell burnout. Prior to 1986, high-fat diets could induce insulin resistance and diabetes. What types of fats are the real culprits? It turns out the animal fats and the free oils cause the insulin resistance. The whole plant foods, even though they're high in fat, don't cause the insulin resistance. This was demonstrated with the Japanese. When the Japanese moved from Japan to Hawaii, they adopted the American lifestyle. Their higher animal fat intake, and they had higher rates of diabetes than their relatives who stayed in Japan and stayed on the low fat diet. Another study was done with Seventh-day Adventists. They looked at our church group because we're a dream for the epidemiologists. They don't have to control for smoking, they don't smoke. They don't have to control for alcohol, they don't nobody drinks alcohol. But half the people are vegetarians and half of them aren't. So they have a control group and they have a test group. By the way, so if you're an Adventist and you're not a vegetarian, switch to vegetarian because you're messing up our statistics. Anyway, they found those that were on a based diet had higher rates of diabetes. So you can drop your risk of just eliminating those problems. Dr. Kolditz, he did the Nurses' Health study over 14 years, studied 83,000 nurses in that period, and they found that actually eating the vegetable fat in its natural form decreased the risk of diabetes. So plant forms of fat, polyunsaturated fats in the plants in the natural form decrease the risk. And one of the questions we have asked frequently is, what about free oils? Free oils. We had a fellow, a worker at a lifestyle center, and it's Mark, and he had diabetes type 1. That's where the pancreas is not producing enough insulin. And that, because of that, he has to adjust his insulin dose based on his blood sugars. And insulin resistance changes his blood sugars dramatically because the pancreas can't produce enough insulin to compensate. So if he ate peanuts, no problem with the blood sugar. Peanut butter, blood sugar shot up. That's the difference. He would eat olives, no problem. Olive oil, blood sugars shoot up. He would eat almonds, no problem. Almond butter, blood sugar shot up. Now, what is going on? What is the difference? And the difference was actually demonstrated by a cardiologist, University of Maryland, Dr. Vogel. It turns out that insulin is a vasodilator. It dilates arteries. When you have insulin resistance, insulin can't dilate the arteries, the arteries stay narrow. So he put a blood pressure cuff around the arm And before he pumped up the pressure, he checked the blood flow with the Doppler ultrasound, measured the blood flow, and he got a baseline. Then he stopped the blood flow for 5 minutes, then he released the cuff, and he rechecked the artery, and the artery had dilated because it was trying to restore blood flow to the ischemic hand, and it hadn't gotten any blood flow for 5 minutes. The arteries dilated normally. The insulin receptors were open and everything was working. Then, the next day, he gave them a fast food meal with 50 grams of the animal fats, trans fats and all. He repeated the test at this time because it looks like there was some insulin resistance there. Okay, well that's animal fats, that's the bad stuff. The next day, let's use olive oil. So he gave them 50 grams of olive oil, repeated the test, released the cup, arteries didn't dilate. Oh no, what's going on? Olive oil's a problem. I thought God made olives to be eaten. What's the problem? He hypothesized that the olive oil was getting oxidized, and it was the oxidized olive oil that was the problem. So the next day, he gave them olive oil with antioxidants. Where did he get antioxidants? Took vegetables, they dried them, they powdered them up, they put them in capsules. These vegetables are full of antioxidants. Gave 6 capsules. They ate the capsules with the olive oil. When he did his test, the arteries dilated when he released the cup. So the antioxidants protected the olive oil from being oxidized, and it prevented the insulin resistance. That's the key. Now the key is, I wonder if God put antioxidants in the olives to protect us from the olive oil. So they went to an olive press where they were pressing the olives out. And they said, we'd like some of your products. They said, oh, you want some olive oil? I said, no, we want your wastewater. Yeah, help yourself. They got the wastewater with the pulp, and they tested it for glutathione, which is our body's main antioxidant. They found huge amounts of glutathione, the antioxidant, in our bodies. And when they gave the water to people to drink, their glutathione levels rose dramatically. So if you're going to eat the olive oil, get it in the olive, get it in the avocado, get it in its natural state with the antioxidants. Ellen White said something interesting, and I always start to understand why. She said olive oil is eaten in the olive is most beneficial. Now, why did she say it that way? Why didn't she say olive oil is beneficial? Well, she said it as eaten in the olive, because in the olive, it has the antioxidants, which protect you from the effects of olive oil. Okay, if a vegan diet can stop insulin resistance, we'll close with this. Then why were Dr. Anderson's success rates 100%? Well, 75% of you think they should all get better. The reason is something called beta cell burnout. This is important to understand. What is beta cell burnout? Well, your pancreas has beta cells in it. Beta cells make insulin. The little granules in those beta cells are what actually produces your insulin. With time, as you're heading for diabetes on the American diet, those beta cells decrease in number, and the little granules inside those cells decrease in number, so you're less able to produce insulin. The good news is you only need half the pancreas if you have a normal. If you don't have any insulin resistance, you only need half the pancreas to control your blood sugars. God gave us a lot of overkill, a lot of margin of safety there. It turns out that to get diabetes, you have to have insulin resistance plus beta cell burnout. You have to lose about half the pancreas before you get diabetes in this form of insulin resistance. They did this with baboons. They took a bunch of baboons. They gave them insulin resistance with nicotinic acid, marked insulin resistance, but they didn't get diabetes. Well, the pancreas was healthy and it just produced more insulin and it overcame the insulin resistance. So they said, okay, well, we'll fix this. The next group of baboons, they killed half the pancreas. They destroyed it with the strep design. Now they gave them insulin resistance. Now they got diabetes because the pancreas could not overcome the insulin resistance. It didn't have any reserve. They also illustrated this with humans. There is a a human genetic defect that causes high insulin resistance, they don't get diabetes because their pancreas is healthy and it just produces more insulin and overcomes it. So the question then is, what causes this? They have found that this beta cell burnout, this destruction of beta cells, occurs as you head towards Japanese Americans, Mexican Americans, and Filipinos. So they find that at the time of diagnosis, at time 0 there, their beta cell function is half of normal. They've lost half their beta cells at the time of diagnosis for diabetes. Then at 6 years later, it's down to about 25%. And they wonder, when was it normal? Well, they traced the line back and they found that 12 years prior to the diagnosis of diabetes, that's when it was normal. So this process was going on for 12 years before the diagnosis of diabetes. What caused it? Well, they had different hypotheses. The top three there require high blood sugars. But remember, the beta cells were being destroyed before the diagnosis of diabetes when the blood sugars were normal. And so the conclusion is lipotoxicity. Lipo being fat, toxic being toxic. When you have high insulin levels with insulin resistance, that insulin is driving fat into not only the fat cells, not only the liver cells, but also the pancreatic cells. You get a fatty pancreas. It causes inflammation of the pancreas, and that's what's causing the beta cell burnout. Is beta cell burnout reversible? Yes, it is. There are some drugs that can do it. Like, for instance, there's a TZD drug that can do it. It can actually increase function 62% by 6 months. The problem is it causes a weight gain, 5 to 10 pounds. Most diabetics don't want to gain weight. If you do a plant-based diet, you can replace the free fatty acid, the beta cell function, and not gain weight. You actually lose weight. And this is what Tony, the beginning of her story, did. She had beta cell burnout. In a year's time, it took a year for that beta cell function to come back for her. Many people, 6 months is all it takes. Some people a year, but when they stick with the program, the beta cell function will return. The insulin resistance usually goes within a couple of weeks. Beta cell burnout may take 6 months to a year. So remember, beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. God has your best interest in heart. And lastly, God can talk to you. You want to hear what God told me when I was between patients. I was between patients, and the thought occurred to me that it says, Dave, you know, what you're doing is nice, but it's not much different than what they were doing in the Dark Ages. I said, the Dark Ages? How so? I said, well, in the Dark Ages, people would be committing sin, and the Holy Spirit would convict them, they'd feel trouble. So they would go to the priest, and they'd say, Father, I have sinned. And the priest would say, okay, do some Hail Marys and do some penance, and then you can resolve the sin. Or they had another system. You could actually go and buy an indulgence. You pay some money for an indulgence, and that was supposed to absolve you from sin. In fact, the system was so efficient that you could buy an indulgence for sins you were planning to commit, but you hadn't committed to. Now, of course, this sparked the Protestant Reformation. Luther said, no, you know, first of all, you know, if you want forgiveness for sin, you got to turn from your sin. That causes repentance. You got to turn away from it. And number two, forgiveness is free. It's a free gift by the blood of Christ on the cross. He paid for it. You can't pay for it. And I said, well, okay, Lord, I understand what they were doing in the Reformation. What's that got to do with me? He says, well, babe, people are on a lifestyle that's destroying their lives. It's destroying their health. So they come to you and you write them an indulgence. I mean, a prescription. To continue on a lifestyle that's destroying their health. So, oh, so you want me to help them turn from that lifestyle to something that's making you feel better? Yeah, you got it. I said, okay. And so now this kind of fades. Is that really God? And it's kind of like, you don't believe it? Pick up the next chart. So I picked up the next chart. Oh, this is Tom. I saw Tom 2 weeks ago, and he had lifestyle issues. You know, his weight, his high blood pressure, his heart disease, his diabetes. And I shared with Tom how he could change his lifestyle and get off these medicines. I'm going to see how Tom's doing. So Tom, how's the lifestyle program going? And kind of hangs his head. He goes, Father, I have sinned. I mean, doctor. But it's not a good question. So anyway, God wants your best health. He doesn't want you to continue. If you hear that voice speaking to you to take the next step in your journey in your walk with Jesus, he'll take you by the hand. He'll help you make that next step and you'll start to fix each other.
Before you play track 4, I need you to know that 4 years ago, God, there was some erosion in both my hips. So I had to look at, and both of them were bad. That's where the little ball where your hip sits down on. Well, it's supposed to be round. You can imagine that. But mine was moon shaped. And this condition was in both of them. So I did replacement in 2015. And I talked to the doctor about the other one. And he says, you want to probably not have this, but go as long as you can before you do that. And so that's what I've been doing. Things have changed for me physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I can no longer run. So if anything got behind me in the alley, I got to turn right. And that, it's caused some back issues and stuff like that. As of this past Tuesday, I was in Charlottesville with pain specialists, and they got me under the microscope where they could look down into my body through this machine that they had, and they went in and they burned off the nerve in my back. And just before coming to rehearsal with Janet for the song that I was going to do today, I came from the hospital having a CT scan because of what the ITAs I have had, the strokes I have had. So you guys got to keep me in prayer, but I know, but God is with you. Amen.
Yeah.
We're about to really step out of faith. In my through everything, there's God who's been faithful to me. When my dreams were lost, when my heart still got you faithful to me. Every word he has promised is when I thought was impossible, I've seen my God looking back, I see. Though in my heart I have questioned and even afraid to believe, yet He is faithful, faithful to me. When my heart looked away, and many times I could not pray, still my God, He was faithful to me. Days so strangely reaching out for what we need, even there, God was faithful to me. Every time I come back to Him, He is waiting there with open arms, and I see once again. You faithful to me. Looking back, His love and mercy I see. Though in my heart I have questioned and even fail to believe, yet He's been faithful to me.
Praise the Lord, saints. Has the Lord been faithful to you? Yes, again. Has the Lord been faithful to you? He's been faithful to Brother Johnson. Amen. Has He been faithful to you? If you have such a testimony, would you please stand with me? God has been faithful to you. If you know, would you please stand with me? First of all, I just want to thank God again for Dr. Emerson. Thank you. The reason we're not seeing this brother on CNN is because he's a Seventh-day Adventist. Groundbreaking technology, amen? Groundbreaking medicine, life-saving medicine. Life-saving decisions. That's what we heard last night. That's what we heard today. How to change your life based on God's guidance. Amen? Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing? I suspect that somewhere in this place, the Holy Spirit has spoken to someone. The Holy Spirit has convinced someone in here that these principles need to start with me here today. Has the Holy Spirit impressed someone in here that way? Has the Holy Spirit spoken to you today that I need to make some lifestyle changes? If the Holy Spirit has spoken to you, would you please join me up front so we can pray for that commitment? Would you please come out of your seats and join me? This is not an appeal to join the church. This is an appeal to make sure your lifestyle commitment is serious, to make sure it's sure, to make sure we invite the Lord's presence into your commitment. Because commitment lasts as long as the drive home. And we want to invite the Lord's presence into our commitment. Amen. Brother Stewart, come on up here and join our circle, my brother. You're part of testimony is Brother James. So come on in here, my brother. Amen. You're part of lifestyle choices going on, positive lifestyle choices going on in the Lynchburg area. Is there one more? Is there someone else who's made a commitment this day to the Lord? Has the Holy Spirit spoken to your heart this morning? Please join us up front for a special prayer. Elder Harris, where are you? It's my elder in the building. Elder Harris, Elder Anderson, will you come up, please? Again, we just want to seal our commitment before God this morning. Elder Anderson, come on up here and take this mic out of my hand, my brother, and pray for these individuals. Again, we're praying for commitment. We're praying that what was heard and what was decided on this morning in the hearts of the Lord will
Let us pray. Father God, you've been so good to us. You've given us instruction today on how to live healthy lives. That is very, very important. Help us to be obedient to that. So we are all standing because we want to recommit ourselves to what we have learned so that our life will be healthy and that we will be able to serve you better because we are seeking God, serve you as we should. And we know that if we are obedient to all the laws of health, that we will be able to make this commitment and keep it. Go with us and stand by us. Let's keep one in that is good here this morning, in a special way. Bless our pastor and bless what we have learned and has been given to us, that we may live healthy lifestyle. All of this we ask in the wonderful name of Jesus and for his sake. Amen.
First, so you may be seated. You may be seated. Praise the Lord. Just a couple of announcements before we release you. Speaking of healthy choices, guess what? There's a bunch of healthy food downstairs waiting for your consumption. Amen? Bless the hands that prepared the food. I can't wait to get down there. Amen? Also, at 3 o'clock, we're going to say goodbye. Dr. Ellison is going to make his final presentation before going back to Maryland this evening. So certainly we want to be here for that. So again, lunch is served downstairs. See you downstairs in a few minutes, and please stay back for Dr. Ellison's final presentation at 3 o'clock. Will you please stand with me one last time. Heavenly Father, we're just grateful for the food we're about to receive. And Father, may you nourish our bodies so we may continue to do thy will. In Jesus' name, our redeemed say, Amen. You may be seated.
Yes. Yes.
Stronger, stronger.
Thank you so much.
Where are you?
Oh, I thought we were gonna grab. Yeah,
It's a big mess. Only God can clean it.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting the Bible.
They're
If they were
not.
reading the Bible,
Most of them need people. So they're not in the woods, so they will kill whatever they see.
I'm here to invite you to lunch briefly, even if you have to go take a plate. I know you're the one like to get on the rest, so I said, just take your plate. I think your wife can get it if you don't, but we're ready to eat, so come on
Yeah,
down.
we go.
And you guys are good, so we're doing guests first, so you're holding up the line. She'll get it.
Yeah, it's changed because we needed the city children running the program.
it's down now. I never seen things like this. I've been doing this since 91.
This is the time when say there was
It's
nothing
people interesting. They can fit. But and they're just drinking the water. It's not saying something. If my English was good, I will say more.
They will not let you speak.
I will say more than that. I talk to him. I talk to him the whole time. We talk to him. Yeah.
But it doesn't hear
He
you.
doesn't hear.
Whatever you
It's like
say,
it's
go
really
ahead,
good.
just follow the police.
It's good name.
Feel sorry.
But I'm gonna sit there.
Yeah, I can't
Lights.
because I've been away from mom.
And we have to train up.
Whatever you guys see, whatever you see, I think I see that.
Let me just say, I just looked at FDR 2 years ago. There was this presentation of why that's it. That's it. That's it. So you get something to do, you're inclined, mortified, and participate in service. But that's, I think, it's a big deal. When you think about the gospel is not. It's not about people. It's not about sitting in the pews of the organization, but offering it. We're all on that last week. That's the whole time. So, I don't want to. So that we without. I don't know. I thought you wanted to talk there. So it's not all that serious. But I agree with that.
I exercised last week and it's like a sciatic nerve, so that's why I work. So now it's just right here. So Phyllis said, massage, but it just feels hard. But Phyllis, I got so upset before things going. Because remember I said we was gonna ride in my car. And I said, well, why can't you take your car and charge it? You should want to choose it.
Yeah,
I said,
that's hard.
So then called Harriet, she said, it's Sunday and it's all me. You want to come? She said, like the service, regular service. So I told her, they are coming to keep that. Oh, he knows. Next time, her tell me come, I'm not even going to dance. I just go by myself. But the whole thing was, I wanted to drive her, use her car, because it's larger than mine. I would have drove, but she don't not scared. So Nancy's kid can drive. Go take her car, yeah, she go. That's what I'm saying. I want to be as I could just got in the car, one day in the back.
You have to come see it.
I said, can I drive her here by myself? I said, one time I looked down the after 3 or 4 in the morning, and my windshield blade saw something. And that time I was physically, but I walked over the car. Because I he doesn't know that he was a man, he should have no place, he should have no car, he should have no job. Now he does throwing on people, riding around, really want to snack to himself. I said, I don't want no man like that to work for me. You guys just not to know. I don't know what's wrong with her. I said, I just fuck. He can't stand up to be a man and say, well, I I got this, and I can help you. You looking for who can help you.
Let's see. That's what I say.
Oh, you can make me
It's sad, but you.
bring up the face of your teeth. You got nothing going for me.
Can you do last step for me? I just love it.
Oh, you can take it. It's in here. This book. Let me tell you
I ain't
what.
got, I don't get this one.
I ordered this. Let me tell you what.
Okay.
I didn't want to use my debit card. Last time I ordered, somebody got hooked to my debit card. So I had one that prepaid to put money on. So me stalling, procrastinating. This was about 45 cents money. It has gone up to $2.75.
Is it on the thing?
You can go to AmazingFacts.com. This story is right in this book.
Okay.
And then look, yeah. So I said, well, they can't see this way back. I'm gonna make bigger copies. And then I look, and then I said, well, show them the service in the real thing. So that's why I just made a copy of the shape of the service.
That was very educational. I got to tell you, I'm a grown up, but I
I
learned a
just
lot.
made a copy of the speech. The kids. That's why I did that. And the avocado, my friend was from Trinidad. People take the avocado, squeeze it. When they do that, they wounded it like. So when you cut the avocado open, you'll see brown spot. It's where it squares it. So you just hold it in your hand and grip it. You don't do it like that. And the seed, you can crush that up and use it for salad. It's supposed to have antitoxins in it too. All the time. But you can have this because I have it right here.
Sure. Thank
I
you
have it
so
right
much.
here, Phyllis. Go online to AmazingFacts.com and then hit sharing, I think, and it'll put up the books that's free. But please say it went up to $2.75 a piece. They were $1.45 later. And I ordered them Wednesday and it was $2.75 each. But this is what I got. It's everything in here.
So it's amazingfacts.com.
Mm-hmm. And well, let me write this book on there so you can, when you go on there, you can pull it up.
Because when I remember,
Because I had two of them and I gave it to my mechanic. He was supposed to come here and come because I was telling him about what's in a cigarette and you sitting there smoking it. And she said, I'm going to take this and give it to my son. Cow's milk, I tell you, cow's milk not good for you. What's in a cigarette? There's one. Formaldehyde, rat poison. Where's that cigarette? Oh, here it is. Formaldehyde, used to preserve dead bodies. Arsenic, used to kill rats. Ammonia, which is used to clean toilets. Acetone, used to remove nail polish. Carbon monoxide, also comes out your car. Hydrogen cyanide, that poison used to execute. What's in a cigarette? You smoking it?
I need to give it to my daughter. Not the one here, the one out of town. I said, some reason why you don't smoke in the house. You know?
AmazingFacts. .com. If it's not, I think it's .com. And then click on I think it's sharing on books. And then I'll pull it up. But remember, this is the book you bought.
Yeah, amazing health facts.
Mm-hmm. And I might go back on it because you can get a DVD with this.
Oh, okay.
Health facts. And
8
8 valves.
secrets for a longer, stronger life.
And I said, man, I didn't want to give this book away, but I said, yeah, I was telling about it, and I said, well, I'll just give you another. So this time I just ordered 2 more of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was supposed to have another usher with me today, but I handled it.
Yeah.
I handled it.
Let me go ahead and have it. It's a lady from my sister's church, and she doesn't know anybody but me because she asked me where I was gonna sit, and I told her I'll sit by her. She gotta leave and go get her mother.
And then I guess come. Supposed to be taking up. Do some both.
And clean up what after everything. Oh, but
So what have you been doing? Very interesting.
Nikki and I even messaged Tristan because I used to tell people about my hair and I'll like on the water both the versus later.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What is Nikki saying?
She hasn't replied back yet, actually.
Did you send her a picture?
Yes. Yeah, I took a bunch of selfies and I sent them all to you. And I sent her a couple too.
Oh, really? Did you get my 47 calls? No, I mean, like, did you see any this morning?
Oh, yeah, I did see that this morning.
Nothing, I just. What did you do? Like, keep your phone on vibrate or something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I'm not allowed to call you, but you can call me.
You don't want to.
No, I always keep my voice on. Because I have to do it. It's big, like, answer.
But no, how come you didn't want to come to this? Because I prefer my walk. I don't know where to do my hair.
I kind of wish. There wasn't really nowhere. Where I could sit by myself.
Yeah, my hair is shorter than yours now. My hair is shorter than yours.
I'm sorry. What happened? I need to tell my don't want Oh, really? Oh. Oh, really? Oh, really? Oh, that's cute. So do you feel like
That's great. Right, I'm gonna go get off now. I'm gonna go finish it.
Oh, hello. Hello there. So you guys be here?
We, just, come visit, come in.
Hey, there. Wow. So, you guys, they're eating now, so you guys, they're eating now, so if you guys are hungry, just go upstairs. But the church service is over.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's-
they did some health thing for the service to us.
get in there. How do you
Pastor's downstairs. Yeah, they're both downstairs.